Listen carefully. Your life is not being destroyed by circumstances. It is being destroyed by your reactions to circumstances. Every emotional spiral steals time, drains focus, weakens discipline, and keeps you stuck in patterns you keep calling bad luck. This audiobook is about ending that cycle. Not calming down for a moment. Not feeling better for a day. Ending it. You are going to learn how to stop overreacting, take back control, and become the kind of person who stays steady, decisive, and dangerous to chaos no matter what hits you. Chapter 1. Stop calling chaos your personality. Let's start with something most people do not want to hear. Your chaos is not your personality. Your instability is not your identity. Your overreactions are not proof that you are deep, passionate, honest, intense, or misunderstood. They are proof of something much less glamorous. They are proof of repetition. They are proof of training. They are proof that you have practiced losing control so many times that now you call it who you are. That is the first lie this chapter has to destroy. Because as long as you keep saying, "That's just how I am," you will never change. You will defend the very pattern that keeps breaking your peace. You will protect the habit that keeps ruining your days, your decisions, your relationships, and your future. You will turn weakness into identity, and then wonder why it feels impossible to grow. A pattern is not a personality. Say that again. A pattern is not a personality. What you repeat, you become. That's the key. If you repeat panic, you become panicked. If you repeat rage, you become reactive. If you repeat self-pity, you become fragile. If you repeat emotional chaos, you become familiar with emotional chaos. And once something becomes familiar, the mind starts calling it natural. It starts calling it normal. It starts calling it you. But familiar is not the same as true. You have a choice. You can keep worshiping your pattern, or you can start confronting it. A lot of people hide behind language. Listen carefully to the phrases people use when they do not want responsibility. I'm just emotional. I'm just an intense person. I care too much. That's just how I am. No. That is not clarity. That is camouflage. That is not self-awareness. That is self-excuse. Because what they are really saying is this: I have repeated this behavior so many times that now I no longer question it. I perform it automatically. I expect other people to tolerate it. I expect life to bend around it. And I do not want to do the uncomfortable work of changing it. That is what is actually being said. And if that sounds harsh, good. It needs to sound harsh. Because soft language keeps people stuck. Soft language lets dysfunction wear a costume. Soft language turns indiscipline into identity. It's not about personality. It's about discipline. That's the key. Look at the employee who gets corrected once and instantly shuts down. The boss gives feedback. Maybe the tone was direct. Maybe the feedback was fair. Maybe it was uncomfortable. And within seconds, the employee is spiraling. The jaw tightens. The chest heats up. The mind starts shouting, "They don't respect me. They always do this. I'm sick of this place." Then comes the attitude, the cold silence, the passive aggression, the emotional withdrawal. Later, they say, "I just don't respond well to criticism." No. You have trained yourself to turn correction into a threat. That is a loop. It is rehearsed. It is practiced. It is not random. Now look at the partner who sees a delayed text and turns it into a full emotional collapse. 1 hour passes. No reply. Suddenly the story begins. Something is wrong. They are pulling away. I knew this would happen. I'm being ignored. I'm not valued. Now the energy shifts. Panic, anger, resentment, overthinking. Then comes the impulsive message. Then another. Then the cold accusation disguised as vulnerability. Later, they say, I'm just someone who feels deeply. No. You have trained yourself to turn uncertainty into emotional chaos. That is a loop. And then the entrepreneur. One bad week. One poor launch. One setback. One plan that did not work on the first try. And suddenly the internal speech begins. Maybe I'm not built for this. Maybe I missed my chance. Maybe this proves I'm failing. Instead of adjusting, they abandon. Instead of learning, they dramatize. Instead of continuing, they collapse into a personal story about inadequacy. Later, they say, I'm just hard on myself. No. You have trained yourself to respond to discomfort by doubting your identity. Again, that is a loop. What do all these examples have in common? They feel personal, but they are patterned. They feel spontaneous, but they are scripted. They feel emotional, but they are behavioral. What you repeat, you become. And if you keep repeating chaos, then chaos will start wearing your name. You have to separate yourself from the habit. That is where power begins. Because right now, many people are fused with their reactions. They do not say, I am experiencing anger. They say, I am angry, and then act like the anger has authority. They do not say, I feel insecure right now. They say, this situation is making me crazy, as if the emotion now deserves obedience. But you are not your impulse. You are not your first reaction. You are not your loudest feeling. A reaction is not an identity. Say that again. A reaction is not an identity. You are not the storm. You are the person feeding it. That is one of the most important truths in this entire book. Because once you understand that, you stop acting helpless. You stop speaking as if your emotions happen to you from the outside. You stop talking like a hostage. You stop romanticizing what is clearly undisciplined. You have a choice. Every time the trigger appears, you have a choice. Every time your chest tightens, you have a choice. Every time your mind races to the worst-case scenario, you have a choice. Not an easy choice. Not a comfortable choice. But a choice. That's the key. The problem is that most people do not want to admit they have a choice, because choice creates responsibility. If it is just who I am, then there is nothing to fix. If it is my personality, then nobody can challenge it. If it is just how I'm wired, then I never have to build discipline. But once you say, this is a repeated pattern, everything changes. Now it can be interrupted. Now it can be replaced. Now it can be trained. Now you can stop protecting the pattern that is hurting you. And that is exactly what many people do. They protect it. They defend it. They explain it. They justify it. They ask other people to understand it. They build an entire story around why they react the way they do, instead of doing the harder, cleaner, stronger thing. Changing it. Listen carefully. Understanding your past may explain your pattern, but it does not excuse your practice of it. Maybe you grew up around chaos. Maybe you learned instability early. Maybe emotional extremes were normal in your home. Fine. That may explain where the pattern began. But it does not get to decide whether the pattern continues. You are an adult now. You have a choice. You can inherit a pattern without worshiping it. You can understand your wiring without surrendering to it. You can acknowledge your tendency without building your identity on top of it. It's not about blame. It's about responsibility. That's the key. So what do you do now? First, stop using identity language for behavioral problems. Stop saying, I'm just emotional. Say, I have practiced reacting emotionally. Stop saying, I'm just intense. Say, I have trained intensity more than stability. That shift matters. Because identity feels fixed. Behavior feels trainable. Second, catch your favorite excuse. Everybody has one. That's just how I am. I care too much. I've always been like this. Write it down if you need to. Then challenge it every time it appears. Do not let that sentence become your cage. Third, name the loop. Not the emotion. The loop. What triggers you? What story do you tell? What behavior follows? What damage comes next? If you can map the loop, you can break the loop. Fourth, stop asking people to accept what you should be working to master. Support is good. Accountability is good. Honesty is good. But expecting the world to accommodate your chaos forever is not honesty. It is avoidance. And fifth, repeat the truth until it becomes stronger than the old script. What you repeat, you become. You are not your impulse. A reaction is not an identity. Stop protecting the pattern that is hurting you. That is the work. Because this entire book is about reclaiming control. Not pretending to be calm. Not performing growth. Real control. The kind that changes your days. The kind that changes your decisions. The kind that changes your life. And that work cannot begin until you stop confusing your habits with yourself. You are not broken, but you are practiced. You are not doomed, but you are conditioned. And if conditioning built this pattern, discipline can break it. That is how emotional spirals lose their power. First, you stop calling them your personality. Then, you start treating them like what they really are, learned reactions that can be unlearned. You have a choice. That's the key. Stop wearing chaos like a name tag. Stop defending what is draining your life. Stop bowing to a pattern just because it has been with you for a long time. What you repeat, you become. So repeat something stronger. You pulled your identity away from the pattern. Good. Now you need to face the next truth. Feeling something does not mean you must follow it. Chapter 2. Feel it, but do not obey it. Now that you have stopped calling chaos your personality, you are ready for the next level of control. You need to stop obeying every feeling that shows up inside you. This is where most people lose their power. Not because they feel too much, because they follow too fast. They feel anger, and they speak from anger. They feel fear, and they retreat from fear. They feel shame, and they collapse under shame. Then they call it honesty. Then they call it authenticity. Then they say, "At least I'm being real." No. You are not being real. You are being ruled. That is the difference. A feeling is real. But that does not mean it is qualified to lead. A feeling is a signal, not an order. Say it again. A feeling is a signal, not an order. That's the key. You are allowed to feel everything. You are not allowed to let everything drive. There is a hard truth here that weak people resist and disciplined people accept. Emotion is immediate, but wisdom takes a second. Emotion arrives hot. Emotion arrives loud. Emotion arrives with urgency. But urgency is not the same as truth. Intensity is not the same as intelligence. And what feels strongest in the moment is often the exact thing that needs the most supervision. You have a choice. That choice does not begin after the feeling disappears. It begins the second the feeling appears. That is what emotional discipline really is. Not the absence of feeling. Not pretending not to care. Not becoming robotic. Emotional discipline is the ability to feel something deeply without surrendering your behavior to it. It's not about numbness, it's about command. That's the key. Look at anger. Somebody disrespects you, cuts you off, talks down to you, ignores you, blames you unfairly. The body reacts instantly. Heat, tension, tight jaw, rapid thoughts. A powerful urge to strike back, to prove a point. To say something sharp. To restore your pride right now. That anger is real. But the anger is not wise. A feeling is a signal, not an order. Maybe the signal says, a boundary matters here. Good. That is useful. Maybe the signal says, pay attention. Something is off. Fine. That is information. But the moment you let anger become your commander, you stop seeking clarity and start seeking release. And release is expensive. One sentence can damage trust. One impulsive response can ruin an opportunity. One ego-driven reaction can create a problem 10 times bigger than the original offense. So the issue is not that you felt angry. The issue is that you obeyed it instantly. You knelt to it. You treated the first emotional wave like the final truth. And that is how people lose control. Now look at panic. You have a difficult conversation coming. A performance review. A confrontation. A phone call you have been avoiding. A truth you need to say out loud. Before it even happens, your body starts reacting. Your mind begins creating disaster. This is going to go badly. I'll say the wrong thing. They'll reject me. I won't handle it well. Again, the panic is real. But real does not mean reliable. A feeling is a signal, not an order. Maybe the signal says, this matters to you. Good. Maybe it says, prepare more carefully. Fine. Use that. But if you let panic lead, you cancel the conversation, delay the decision, hide behind excuses, and call avoidance self-protection. That is not self-protection. That is self-betrayal. You have a choice. Feel the panic. Do not obey the panic. That's the key. And then shame. This one destroys people quietly. You make a mistake. You fail publicly. You disappoint someone. You lose money. You say the wrong thing. You fall short of your own standards. Shame comes in fast. Heavy. Personal. Not just, I did something wrong, but, I am wrong. Not just, I failed, but, I am a failure. That is how shame talks. And that is exactly why shame cannot be trusted with authority. A feeling is a signal, not an order. Maybe the signal says, correct this. Good. Maybe it says, grow here. Good. But when shame takes command, it does not push growth. It pushes hiding. It pushes paralysis. It pushes self-punishment. It turns a mistake into an identity sentence. And once again, the problem is not feeling shame. The problem is kneeling to it immediately and calling that honesty. A lot of people are proud of how quickly they obey emotion. They think instant expression is courage. They think blurting out every feeling is authenticity. They think reacting in real time is strength. It is not strength. It is lack of filtration. It is lack of command. It is lack of discipline. It's not about honesty, it's about discipline. That's the key. Honesty is not saying the first thing your nervous system wants to say. Honesty is telling the truth after the emotion stops distorting it. That matters. Because your first feeling is often primitive, protective, defensive, exaggerated. It is trying to guard you, not guide you. It is built for survival, not for strategy. So if you make decisions from the first emotional wave, you will keep creating outcomes that your wiser self has to clean up later. That is why the pause matters. And most people hate the pause. Because the pause feels weak when you are addicted to urgency. But the pause is power. The pause is where authority returns. The pause is where you stop being dragged and start deciding. Notice it, name it, do not obey it. That is the discipline. Notice it, name it, do not obey it. Say it again. Notice it, name it, do not obey it. When anger hits, notice it. I feel anger. Name it clearly. Not, This is ridiculous. Not, they always do this. Just the emotion. I feel anger. Then do not obey it. Do not text. Do not lash out. Do not speak from the hottest version of yourself. When panic hits, notice it. I feel fear. I feel panic. Name it clearly. Then do not obey it. Do not cancel the hard thing just because your body wants escape. When shame hits, notice it. I feel shame. Name it clearly. Then do not obey it. Do not disappear. Do not spiral. Do not turn one mistake into a whole identity. Your first feeling is not your final decision. That sentence alone can change a life. Your first feeling is not your final decision. That's the key. Now here is the practical work. First, slow your body down before you trust your mind. Breathe slower. Unclench your jaw. Relax your shoulders. Sit down if you need to. Walk if you need to. Drink water if you need to. Delay the response. Why? Because a flooded body creates a distorted mind. You cannot think cleanly in a state of internal chaos. Second, shorten the language. Do not say, "This always happens," or "Everything is ruined," or "They never respect me." That is emotional language trying to seize power. Use simple language. I feel angry. I feel nervous. I feel embarrassed. Precision weakens panic. Clean language restores control. Third, create a rule. No major decisions in a peak emotional state. No quitting. No confessing everything. No sending the big message. No ending the relationship. No making the threat. No posting the rant. No dramatic move while emotion is still driving. You have a choice. Delay is not weakness. Delay is leadership. Fourth, ask one hard question. What does this feeling want me to do, and what does wisdom require me to do? Those are often not the same. The feeling wants immediate relief. Wisdom wants long-term strength. The feeling wants escape. Wisdom wants alignment. The feeling wants performance. Wisdom wants discipline. Choose wisdom. That's the key. Fifth, rehearse non-obedience in small moments. This is how you train it. Not just in breakdowns. In traffic. In disagreement. In minor embarrassment. In delays. In inconvenience. When you feel the surge, practice not obeying. That is how self-command is built. Repetition. Controlled repetition. What you practice in small moments becomes available in large moments. And that is how you change. Not by becoming someone who never feels. By becoming someone who does not bow. That is the transformation. Feelings are part of life. They are not the enemy. They can warn you, reveal you, point to something important. But the second you treat them like kings, they start ruling your life with zero wisdom and zero consistency. So remember it. A feeling is a signal, not an order. Notice it, name it, do not obey it. Your first feeling is not your final decision. You have a choice. Always. That choice is where your power lives. That choice is where emotional spirals begin to die. Because the spiral needs obedience to survive. It needs your instant reaction. It needs your unfiltered surrender. It needs you to confuse emotion with authority. Do not give it that. Feel fully. Pause deliberately. Choose carefully. That is control. That is discipline. That is how you reclaim your life from your own impulses. You have separated feeling from command. Good. But control gets lost even faster when one unchecked thought turns into a full emotional collapse. Now it is time to catch the spiral at the beginning, before it owns your whole day. Chapter 3. Interrupt the spiral before it becomes your day. Most people think emotional spirals begin with a breakdown. They do not. They begin with a thought, a fast thought, an unchecked thought, a thought that arrives, gets believed instantly, and starts building a world around itself. That is how the spiral begins. Not with tears, not with rage, not with panic, with interpretation. That's the key. Something happens. Small, ordinary, maybe inconvenient, maybe unclear, maybe uncomfortable, and then your mind rushes in to explain it. Not carefully, not truthfully, fast, emotional, dramatic. That explanation becomes a feeling. That feeling becomes a behavior. That behavior becomes damage. Then comes regret. That is the anatomy of the spiral. Trigger, interpretation, emotional amplification, impulsive action, regret. Say it again. Trigger, interpretation, emotional amplification, impulsive action, regret. If you do not understand that sequence, you will keep blaming life for damage your own unchecked interpretation created. You have a choice, and the choice begins earlier than you think. Not after the outburst, not after the panic, not after the apology. Earlier, at the thought. Catch it early or carry it all day. That is the lesson. Catch it early or carry it all day. Most people do not catch it early because they do not respect how fast the mind can turn a moment into a meaning. A short email becomes rejection. A neutral tone becomes disrespect. A delay becomes abandonment. A setback becomes proof of failure. One awkward moment becomes a whole identity crisis. This is what the undisciplined mind does. It does not just observe. It adds. It colors. It exaggerates. It rushes to the worst interpretation because the worst interpretation creates the strongest emotion. And strong emotion feels convincing. But convincing is not the same as true. That's the key. Look at something simple. You open your email. There is a short message from your boss or client. No greeting. No warmth. Just a line or two. Direct. Efficient. Immediate reaction. They're upset. I did something wrong. I'm in trouble. They're disappointed. Now your body tightens. Your focus drops. Your mind starts scanning the past week for mistakes. You reread the message 5 times. You answer too defensively, or you avoid answering at all. Then hours later you find out they were simply busy. What happened? A trigger happened. Then an interpretation. Then emotional amplification. Then impulsive action. Then regret. Catch it early or carry it all day. Now look at another example. You say something slightly awkward in a conversation. Maybe it did not land. Maybe there was a pause. Maybe someone changed the subject. And instead of moving on, your mind grips it, replays it, enlarges it. Why did I say that? That sounded stupid. They probably think I'm awkward. I always do this. I never know what to say. Now one small social moment has become an all-day internal trial. You replay the scene while brushing your teeth, while driving, while working, while trying to sleep. Not because the moment was catastrophic. Because the interpretation was catastrophic. This is how people exhaust themselves. Not from reality. From repeated mental rehearsal of distorted meaning. Do not add fuel. That is the key. Then the financial setback. One bad week. One slow month. One unexpected bill. One plan that did not work. One loss. And instead of saying, "This is a setback," the mind says, "This is proof. I'm behind. I'm failing. I'll never recover. Maybe I am not built for this." Again, the event is real. The story is optional. You have a choice. You can address the setback, or you can turn it into an identity-level catastrophe. And once you do that, you stop solving. You start spiraling. You stop adapting. You start dramatizing. You stop moving. You start drowning in a story that your mind created faster than your discipline could interrupt it. That is why emotional spirals are so dangerous. They do not just change your mood. They hijack your day. They hijack your output. They hijack your relationships. They hijack your decisions. And the whole thing often starts with one thought that went unchallenged. One thought. That's the key. So what do? You interrupt it. Not after it gets huge. Before. Interrupt the story before the story becomes your state. Say that again. Interrupt the story before the story becomes your state. This is not about denying reality. It is about refusing to let your first dramatic interpretation become the operating system for your day. Here are the tools. First, silence. When the trigger happens, stop talking about it immediately. Stop announcing it. Stop texting 3 people. Stop narrating it out loud. Stop repeating, "I can't believe this happened," 10 different ways. Because every time you narrate the trigger with emotional language, you reinforce it. You do not calm it down. You give it structure. You make it heavier. Do not perform the pain. That's the key. A lot of people do not process emotion. They perform it. They rehearse it for an audience, even if the audience is just themselves. They say the same line again and again until the nervous system starts treating a small problem like a major threat. Silence breaks that loop. Silence gives you room to see before you react. Second, breath. Not because breathing is magic. Because breathing slows the body, and a slower body gives you a better chance at a cleaner thought. When the spiral begins, your breathing often becomes shallow, fast, tight. That tells the body danger is here. So change the signal. Breathe longer out than in. Slow it down. 4 seconds in. 6 seconds out. Again. 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 It's not about comfort, it's about control. That's the key. Third, movement. Move your body before you move your mouth. Stand up. Walk. Step outside. Wash your face. Change rooms. Stretch. Physical movement interrupts mental fixation. It reminds the brain that you are not trapped inside the story. A spiral loves stillness when stillness becomes mental imprisonment. Break the position. Break the loop. Fourth, delayed response. This one saves lives, careers, and relationships. Do not answer the text at peak emotion. Do not send the email while your chest is tight. Do not make the call while your mind is racing. Delay the response until you can tell the truth without adding poison. You have a choice. Urgency is often the spiral trying to secure your obedience before wisdom arrives. Do not give it that advantage. Fifth, challenge the interpretation. Ask simple questions. What actually happened? What am I assuming? What evidence do I have? What else could be true? What action helps right now? That is how you stop worshipping your first thought. Because the spiral feeds on certainty. False certainty. I know what this means. No, you do not. Most people suffer more from the meaning they assign than from the event itself. Interrupt the story before the story becomes your state. Sixth, stop repeating the trigger. This matters more than people think. If you tell the same upsetting story 10 times in one day, you are not releasing it. You are deepening it. Every retelling locks in the emotional charge. Every dramatic replay teaches the mind, this is important. Keep this active. Do not add fuel. Do not perform the pain. These are not soft suggestions. These are rules for self-command. Because when you fail to interrupt early, the spiral spreads. One email ruins your morning. One comment ruins your confidence. One problem ruins your whole week. Not because life was that powerful. Because your interpretation was left unmanaged. Catch it early or carry it all day. That is the law. And here is the deeper truth. The earlier you interrupt, the less force you need. Once the spiral gets momentum, it is harder to stop. That is why disciplined people do not wait until they are in full collapse to intervene. They intervene at the first sign of distortion. The first exaggerated thought. The first urge to narrate. The first tightening in the chest. The first internal sentence that starts with, "This always," or "I never." That is where power lives. Not in recovery alone. In prevention. You do not need their permission to stop a spiral. You do not need perfect conditions. You do not need someone else to rescue your state. You need awareness. You need interruption. You need discipline. It's not about sensitivity, it's about management. That's the key. So remember the sequence. Trigger. Interpretation. Emotional amplification. Impulsive action. Regret. And remember where to fight. At the interpretation. At the story. At the first distorted meaning. Catch it early or carry it all day. That is how you reclaim the hours emotional chaos has been stealing from you. That is how you keep one moment from infecting the next. That is how you stop a feeling from becoming a full-day identity. You have a choice. Interrupt early. Breathe. Go silent. Move. Delay. Question the story. Do not add fuel. Do not perform the pain. Interrupt the story before the story becomes your state. You stopped calling chaos your personality. You stopped obeying every feeling. Now you are learning to catch the spiral before it owns your day. Good. But to do that consistently, you must become suspicious of the thoughts that arrive loudest when you are hurt or angry. Chapter 4. Stop trusting every thought that arrives angry. Anger has a voice. And when it shows up, it sounds certain. It sounds sharp. It sounds justified. It sounds final. That is why so many people trust it. That is why so many people ruin things with it. They think the intensity of the thought proves the truth of the thought. It does not. Intensity is not accuracy. Say that again. Intensity is not accuracy. That's the key. A loud thought is not automatically a true thought. A fast thought is not automatically a wise thought. An angry thought is not automatically a useful thought. But in the moment, it feels that way. That is the danger. Anger creates mental volume. It turns up the sound on judgment. It makes one interpretation feel undeniable. And once that happens, people stop examining the thought. They start serving it. That is where damage begins. You have a choice. The choice is not whether anger will visit you. It will. The choice is whether anger gets to narrate reality for you. That's the key. When you are angry, the mind becomes a distortion machine. It does not just report. It edits. It exaggerates. It fills in blanks. It takes partial facts and wraps them in total conclusions. They don't respect me. I always fail. This ruined everything. I need to respond right now. Listen to those sentences. They are absolute. They are inflated. They are emotionally satisfying. And they are often wildly incomplete. That is what anger does. It pushes the mind toward extreme language. And extreme language creates reckless behavior. Once you say, always, never, everything, nothing, ruined, disrespected, done, or over, you are no longer thinking clearly. You are building a courtroom inside your head where emotion is the prosecutor, the judge, and the witness. And then you wonder why the verdict is so harsh. Intensity is not accuracy. That is the law in this chapter. Take the thought. They don't respect me. Maybe someone interrupted you. Maybe they forgot to reply. Maybe they were blunt. Maybe they were distracted. Could disrespect be true? Possibly. But anger does not say, possibly. Anger says, definitely. Anger does not investigate. It declares. And once it declares, your body follows. Your tone changes. Your face hardens. Your words get sharper. You stop trying to understand. You start trying to win. Now look at, I always fail. That thought rarely appears when you are calm. It appears when you are hurt, embarrassed, or frustrated. One mistake happens. One plan goes wrong. One attempt falls short. And suddenly the mind reaches for an identity statement. Not, this failed. Not, that attempt failed. But, I always fail. That is not analysis. That is emotional exaggeration pretending to be insight. Facts, not drama. That's the key. Then there is, this ruined everything. No, it probably did not. It may have complicated something. It may have delayed something. It may have hurt something. But ruined everything is usually the language of emotional flooding, not objective truth. And once you believe that sentence, you start behaving like everything is ruined. You stop problem solving. You stop adjusting. You stop acting with precision. Why? Because your language has already told your nervous system the situation is beyond repair. Words matter. Internal words matter even more. Because before reckless behavior appears in your life, reckless language appears in your mind. That is where you must get stronger. You have a choice. And then the classic one, I need to respond right now. No. You probably do not. What you need right now is distance. What you need right now is discipline. What you need right now is not expression, but control. Urgency is one of anger's favorite disguises. It tells you that immediate response equals strength. It tells you that delay means weakness. It tells you that if you do not act now, you are letting something slide. That is how people send messages they regret. That is how people burn bridges they later wish they had crossed with more wisdom. That is how one emotional moment becomes a permanent consequence. Do not let an angry mind write your life strategy. Say that again. Do not let an angry mind write your life strategy. That's the key. An angry mind is built for defense, not design. It wants release, not results. It wants to hit back, not build forward. So when anger is active, your thoughts must be questioned more carefully, not trusted more blindly. The louder the thought, the more carefully it must be examined. That is emotional adulthood. Weak people trust whatever they feel most intensely. Strong people inspect it. That is the difference. So how do you inspect it? You use questions. Simple questions. Hard questions. Clean questions. What actually happened? What am I adding? What action helps? These 3 questions can save you from 1,000 bad decisions. Start with the first one. What actually happened? Not what you felt happened. Not what you fear it means. What actually happened? They sent a short message. They changed their tone. They disagreed with you. They corrected you. You made a mistake. You lost money. You were ignored for 2 hours. Good. Stay there. Stay with the facts. Facts, not drama. That's the key. Then ask the second question. What am I adding? This is where most of the spiral lies. You are adding mind reading. You are adding absolutes. You are adding motive. You are adding prediction. You are adding identity. They hate me. This always happens. I knew I was not enough. It's over. That is what you are adding. And once you see what you are adding, you get your power back. Because facts must be dealt with. Additions can be removed. Then ask the third question. What action helps? Not what action satisfies anger. What action helps? Does responding now help? Does escalating help? Does replaying this for 6 hours help? Does sending the long message help? Does making a grand conclusion help? Usually not. Helpful action is smaller, calmer, cleaner. Wait. Clarify. Ask a question. Take notes. Step back. Correct the mistake. Set the boundary later, with control. That is what helps. It's not about being passive, it's about being disciplined. That's the key. Now let's make this practical. When you notice anger rising, do not immediately trust the sentence your mind offers. Put it on trial. Write it down if you need to. They do not respect me. Ask, what actually happened? They interrupted me twice in the meeting. Good. That is the fact. What am I adding? I'm adding that they think I'm worthless. Good. Now you are seeing clearly. What action helps? Address it calmly later. Speak directly. Do not explode in the meeting. That is discipline. I always fail. What actually happened? This launch underperformed. What am I adding? I'm adding that one bad result defines my whole future. What action helps? Review what went wrong. Adjust. Try again. That is how strength sounds. Not dramatic. Not loud. Usable. Return to what is true. That phrase matters because anger hates truth with edges. Anger wants truth inflated. Truth sharpened. Truth weaponized. But real truth is often narrower than emotion wants it to be. Someone may have been rude. That is true. That does not mean they are your enemy. You may have made a mistake. That is true. That does not mean you are a failure. Something may have gone wrong. That is true. That does not mean everything is ruined. Return to what is true. Again. Return to what is true. That's the key. And understand this. You do not need to become less human to do this. You do not need to erase anger. You do not need their permission to pause before reacting. You do not need to justify your calm. You do not need to prove your strength by being the fastest person to strike back. Real strength is slower. Real strength examines. Real strength filters. Real strength refuses to let emotional intensity impersonate wisdom. That is how control is built. So from this point forward, make this a rule. Never trust the first angry sentence completely. Inspect it. Reduce it. Question it. Replace it with something factual. Then act from there. Because an angry mind can give you data, but it cannot be given authority. Not with your words. Not with your decisions. Not with your future. Intensity is not accuracy. Facts, not drama. Return to what is true. Do not let an angry mind write your life strategy. You have a choice. Every time. And that choice is the difference between one bad feeling and one ruined day. One hard moment and one broken relationship. One setback and one self-inflicted collapse. You are learning to separate reaction from reality. Good. But control is not only mental. If your body is overloaded, exhausted, and undertrained, your emotions will always hit harder than they need to. Chapter 5. Build a nervous system that can hold pressure. A lot of people think emotional control is a mindset problem. It is not only a mindset problem. It is also a capacity problem. That matters. Because you can repeat affirmations all day. You can read books. You can talk about growth. You can say you want peace. But if your body is fried, your mind will crack faster than your intentions can save you. That's the key. A weak system creates loud reactions. Say it again. A weak system creates loud reactions. If you are sleep-deprived, overstimulated, sedentary, flooded with notifications, constantly tense, overcaffeinated, under-recovered, and living in low-grade physical stress, then ordinary life will feel like an attack. Small problems will hit harder. Normal pressure will feel personal. Minor frustration will feel like a breaking point.
Why?
Because your nervous system is already overloaded. So when life adds one more demand, one more delay, one more conflict, one more disappointment, you do not respond from strength. You respond from depletion. And depleted people are more emotional than they are honest about. You have a choice. You can keep pretending your reactions are purely psychological, or you can admit that your physical condition is shaping your emotional life every single day. It's not about positivity, it's about capacity. That's the key. This is where many people sabotage themselves. They want calm under pressure, but they build a life that makes calm nearly impossible. They sleep too little, scroll too much, sit too long, rush everything, eat badly, breathe shallowly, live with constant noise. Then they wonder why they are irritable, anxious, impulsive, and fragile. Because the body keeps score. And the body always collects. A weak system creates loud reactions. Look at the person who snaps over something small. A simple question. A minor inconvenience. A harmless comment. And they explode.
Why?
Was the comment really that devastating? Usually not. They were exhausted. Their body was already strained. Their system had no margin. So the smallest spark hit dry ground. Now look at the person who quits because of overwhelm. One hard week. Too many tasks. A few unmet expectations. A little pressure. And they start saying, "I can't do this anymore." Not because the mission is impossible. Because their nervous system has been running red for too long. They are not evaluating reality. They are reacting from overload. Then the catastrophizing. This one fools people because it sounds intellectual. It sounds like analysis. But often it is just a stressed body producing dramatic thoughts. The body is tense. Sleep is low. Stimulation is high. Breathing is shallow. So the mind starts telling stories that match the condition. Something is wrong. I'm falling behind. I can't handle this. This is too much.
No.
Maybe it is not too much. Maybe your system is too strained. Stability is physical. That's the key. You do not rise to your intentions. You fall to your condition. That sentence should stay with you. You do not rise to your intentions. You fall to your condition. People love intentions. Intentions are cheap. I want to be calmer. I want to be more disciplined. I want to stop overreacting. Fine. Good. But what condition are you in when pressure arrives? Because pressure does not care what you meant to do. Pressure reveals what your system can actually hold. That is why this chapter is not about motivation. It is about maintenance. Not exciting maintenance. Not glamorous maintenance. Boring strength. Real strength. The kind that keeps you from collapsing over things that should never have owned you in the first place. Calm is trained. Say it again. Calm is trained. Calm is not a personality gift handed to a lucky few. Calm is built through repeated physical and behavioral choices that teach your body how to stay regulated under stress. And if you never train that, then chaos will keep feeling normal. So let's make this practical. Start with sleep. Not because sleep solves everything. Because poor sleep makes everything worse. It lowers patience. Weakens impulse control. Heightens emotional reactivity. Distorts interpretation. Makes ordinary stress feel heavier than it is. If you are serious about emotional discipline, stop treating sleep like an optional luxury. It is part of your emotional training. Go to bed earlier. Cut the late-night stimulation. Stop acting shocked that a tired brain makes reckless decisions. You have a choice. Protect your rest, or keep paying for your exhaustion in conflict, confusion, and emotional volatility. Next, physical training. You need some form of regular physical stress that you choose on purpose. Lifting, running, walking hard, mobility work, bodyweight training. Something. Why? Because training teaches the body a critical lesson. Discomfort is not danger. Increased heart rate is not emergency. Tension is not collapse. Effort is not threat. That changes you. When the body becomes more familiar with manageable stress, the mind becomes less dramatic under everyday pressure. It's not about appearance, it's about resilience. That's the key. Then walking. Underrated. Almost insultingly simple. And powerful. Walk when the mind is noisy. Walk when you want to react. Walk when the spiral starts building. Walking regulates rhythm. It changes state. It burns nervous energy without demanding performance. It gives your thoughts somewhere to go without letting them take over. You do not need their permission to step away and reset your body before you answer life. That is not avoidance. That is leadership. Then breathing. Again, not because it is trendy. Because it works. Most emotionally reactive people live in shallow breath without even noticing. Chest tight. Breath short. Body braced. That state tells the brain, we are under threat. Then the brain starts searching for proof. So learn to exhale longer than you inhale. Slow the body on purpose. Teach your system that intensity can arrive without becoming a crisis. Calm is trained. Now let's talk about digital chaos. Many people are not emotionally unstable. They are overstimulated. There is a difference. Too much noise. Too many alerts. Too many opinions. Too much comparison. Too much bad news. Too much scrolling when tired. Too much content entering a system that has no recovery. Then one real-life problem happens and the system has nothing left. Reduce the noise. That is a serious discipline. Put the phone down more often. Stop beginning and ending the day with digital input. Stop feeding your nervous system chaos and then acting surprised when chaos becomes your baseline. A weak system creates loud reactions. And low-stakes consistency matters more than dramatic recovery. This is where people get lazy. They wait for a breakdown, then they suddenly care about calm. They wait until they are overwhelmed, then they talk about healing. No. Train before the moment. Regulate before the conflict. Build capacity before life tests you. That is discipline. Small routines. Repeated daily. Sleep at a real hour. Walk daily. Train several times a week. Breathe on purpose. Reduce input. Eat in a way that supports energy instead of wrecking it. Do boring things well. That is how strong people stay steady. Not through intensity. Through consistency. You do not rise to your intentions. You fall to your condition. And condition is built in the quiet parts of life. The morning. The evening. The choices nobody praises. The choices that look too simple to matter. Those are the choices that decide whether pressure makes you focused or emotional. You have a choice. You can keep trying to solve physical instability with mental slogans. Or you can train the system that carries your mind everywhere you go. Stability is physical. That's the key. And understand this clearly. Recovery is not weakness. Rest is not laziness. Structure is not rigidity. These are tools. These are foundations. These are the things that let you handle pressure without turning every inconvenience into a personal emergency. The goal is not to become delicate. The goal is to become durable. Durable people can absorb more without dramatizing more. Durable people do not need perfect conditions to stay clear. Durable people have built a nervous system that can hold pressure without leaking chaos into every room they enter. That is the work. So from this point on, stop asking only, "What am I thinking?" Also ask, "What condition am I in? Am I rested? Am I overloaded? Am I tense? Am I flooded with noise? Am I physically undertrained for the pressure I keep claiming I want to handle?" Those are adult questions. Those are transformative questions. Because when your system gets stronger, your reactions get quieter. When your body gets steadier, your mind gets cleaner. When your condition improves, your discipline becomes more available. A weak system creates loud reactions. Calm is trained. Stability is physical. You do not rise to your intentions. You fall to your condition. Remember that. You are not just trying to think better. You are trying to become harder to shake. That means building a body and a system that do not panic at every demand. Good. But even a stronger system can be sabotaged if you keep rehearsing every emotional hit out loud. Chapter 6. Do not vent what you need to master. A lot of people think expression is healing. Sometimes it is. A lot of people think saying it out loud means they are processing it. Sometimes they are. But a lot of the time, what they call processing is just performance. That matters. Because not every feeling needs an audience. Not every emotional wave deserves a microphone. Not every frustrating moment should be turned into a speech, a group chat, a late-night phone call, or a social media confession. Why? Because what you rehearse, you strengthen. Say it again. What you rehearse, you strengthen. That's the key. If you rehearse panic, you strengthen panic. If you rehearse outrage, you strengthen outrage. If you rehearse victimhood, you strengthen victimhood. If every emotional swing gets expressed, repeated, narrated, and socially reinforced, then you are not mastering the feeling. You are training it. You are giving it language, identity, and familiarity. You are making it easier for that same pattern to show up again tomorrow. You have a choice. You can use your words to build control. Or you can use your words to deepen the spiral. And most people have no idea how often they do the second one. They say they are just getting it out. No. A lot of the time, they are getting deeper into it. It's not about expression, it's about discipline. That's the key. Now be clear. This chapter is not telling you to suppress emotion until it poisons you. This is not about bottling things up, pretending you feel nothing, or becoming cold. That is not strength. That is fear wearing armor. This chapter is about selective expression. Purposeful expression. Expression with direction. Because there is a difference between speaking to solve and speaking to spread. And if you do not learn that difference, you will keep mistaking emotional leakage for emotional maturity. Let's start with the obvious example. You get triggered. A text goes unanswered. A conversation goes badly. A boss says something sharp. A partner seems distant. A plan falls apart. What happens next for many people? Immediate outreach. They text 5 friends. They send screenshots. They tell the story from the most wounded angle possible. They repeat every detail. They ask, "Can you believe this?" They keep the emotion hot by handing it from person to person. Why? Because attention feels like relief. Validation feels like clarity. But relief is not resolution. Validation is not mastery. What you rehearse, you strengthen. Every time you retell the pain without purpose, you make the emotional pattern more available. You lock the interpretation in. You confirm the story. You hear yourself say it again, and again, and again, until it no longer feels like one passing reaction. It feels like your identity. That is how weakness hardens. Not only in private. Socially. You start becoming known for the very instability you should be learning to govern. That's the key. Look at the person who has one difficult interaction at work, then replays it all evening. First to a coworker, then to a friend, then to a partner, then again in their own head while showering, driving, and trying to sleep. Same details, same emotional emphasis, same conclusion: they disrespected me. This place is toxic. I'm sick of this. Maybe the situation mattered. Maybe it deserves action. But repeated retelling does not automatically create insight. Often it just creates emotional entrenchment. The person is not moving closer to truth. They are moving closer to performance. The story becomes polished, sharper, more dramatic, more certain, less useful. And then they wonder why they cannot calm down. Because what you rehearse, you strengthen. Now the social media version. This one is dangerous because it rewards drama instantly. Temporary pain becomes public identity in minutes. Someone feels rejected, hurt, angry, unseen, or disappointed, and before the feeling even settles, it gets turned into a post, a quote, a vague message, a status update, a performance of pain aimed at an audience.
Why?
Because public expression creates a fast emotional payoff. Attention, sympathy, agreement, indirect revenge, a sense of being seen. But here is the cost. When you broadcast every emotional spike, you train yourself to externalize before you stabilize. You stop building an inner container. You stop learning how to hold emotion privately long enough to understand it. You become dependent on witnesses. That is not freedom. That is weakness with an audience. You don't need their permission to process your life with dignity. You don't need their permission to stay quiet until you understand what is actually happening. You don't need their permission to refuse performance. That's the key. And understand the hidden problem here. Publicizing every emotional swing makes self-command harder, not easier. Because once the emotion is out there, now you have to stay loyal to the version you performed. You told everyone you were devastated, furious, done, finished, betrayed. Now calming down feels embarrassing. Nuance feels inconvenient. Growth feels like backtracking. So instead of regulating, you double down. That is why public drama is addictive. It traps you inside your own exaggerated narration. You have a choice. You can process the feeling, or you can recruit an audience for it. Those are not the same thing. Now let's get sharper. There is a difference between healthy processing and emotional broadcasting. Healthy processing sounds like this. What am I actually feeling? What triggered this? What part is fact and what part is interpretation? What action would solve this? Do I need support, or do I just want agreement? That is processing. It is slower, cleaner, more honest. Performance sounds like this. Let me tell the story in the most emotionally charged way possible. Let me repeat the wound until it becomes the center of the evening. Let me post the pain before I understand it. Let me make sure other people feel what I am feeling. That is not processing. That is emotional spread. Speak to solve, not to spread. Say it again. Speak to solve, not to spread. That's the key. So what should you do instead? First, delay expression. Not forever. Just long enough to separate the feeling from the first dramatic version of the story. Give it time. Let the body cool. Let the mind clarify. If you still need to speak after that, good. Now you are more likely to speak with precision instead of pressure. Second, choose one person, not 5. If support is needed, choose someone stable. Someone honest. Someone who will not inflame you for entertainment. Someone who can help you return to what is true. not someone who will automatically echo your most emotional conclusion. Third, define the purpose before you speak. Ask yourself, am I trying to solve, clarify, confess, ask for advice, or just discharge energy? If the answer is just discharge, do not speak yet. Walk. Right. Breathe. Sit with it. Because using other people as a dumping ground for unprocessed emotion is not connection. It is avoidance. Process. Do not perform. That's the key. Fourth, write before you talk. Private writing is useful because it exposes exaggeration without turning it into social reality. Get the feeling out on paper. Say the ugly version there. Then read it back. You will often hear the distortion more clearly when nobody is reacting to it. Fifth, stop turning every temporary emotion into a permanent statement. Do not say, I'm done, I hate this, I can't take it, or this always happens, just because you are flooded for 10 minutes. Temporary feelings should not be allowed to make permanent speeches. Master it before you broadcast it. Say that again. Master it before you broadcast it. That does not mean you must be perfect before speaking. It means you should be responsible before speaking. It means the feeling should not still be driving the car while you are handing the microphone to the world. It's not about silence, it's about self-command. That's the key. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is say less. Not because you are afraid, because you are disciplined. Because you know that words can either stabilize a feeling or strengthen it. Because you understand that every retelling is rehearsal. And what you rehearse, you strengthen. This chapter is really about one question. Do your words make you stronger or weaker? Do they move you toward truth or toward theatrics? Do they help you solve the problem or spread the emotion? Do they help you return to yourself or make you more dependent on being seen in your worst moment? Those are adult questions. Those are disciplined questions. And if you start asking them, your emotional life will change. You will talk less, but with more power. You will share less impulsively, but more truthfully. You will stop confusing visibility with healing. You will stop making every emotion public before it becomes useful. And most importantly, you will start building the ability to hold a feeling without instantly handing it away. That is strength. That is maturity. That is how spirals lose momentum. Because a spiral feeds on narration. It feeds on repetition. It feeds on social reinforcement. Remove those and it has less oxygen. You have a choice. Process, do not perform. Speak to solve, not to spread. Master it before you broadcast it. What you rehearse, you strengthen. Remember that every time you feel the urge to turn a fresh emotional wound into a public event. Sometimes the strongest move is not to announce the pain. It is to outgrow it quietly. You have learned to say less and master more. Good. But silence alone is not enough. At some point, the moment still demands action. The next step is learning how to replace emotional urgency with deliberate behavior. Chapter 7. Replace emotional urgency with deliberate action. Most people think discipline is proven in big moments. It is not. It is proven in the small, unglamorous seconds right after discomfort arrives. That is where your real character shows up. Not when everything is calm. Not when motivation is high. Not when the path is easy. Right after discomfort. Right after embarrassment. Right after resistance. Right after the feeling that says, I don't want to. That's the key. Because in those seconds, most people ask the wrong question. They ask, what do I feel like doing? That question ruins lives. Because the answer is almost always the same. Hide. Delay. Escape. Defend. Quit. Lash out. Numb out. Avoid. Feelings love short-term relief. Discipline loves long-term alignment. So the better question is this. What does the situation require? Say it again. What does the situation require? That is the shift. That is maturity. That is self-command. Do what is required, not what is rewarded emotionally. That's the key. The emotional reward is immediate. That is why it is so dangerous. Snapping back feels powerful for a second. Avoiding the hard conversation feels safe for a moment. Quitting feels relieving for an hour. Breaking your promise feels easier tonight. But the emotional reward is temporary, and the damage is cumulative. That is what weak people do not understand. Every time you choose emotional reward over deliberate action, you make yourself less trustworthy to your own future. You train inconsistency. You train avoidance. You train yourself to collapse the moment a task stops flattering your mood. You have a choice. You can build a life around emotional comfort, or you can build a life around required action. Only one of those leads anywhere worth going. It's not about mood, it's about discipline. That's the key. Look at the person who gets criticized at work. They present something. It gets challenged. A mistake is pointed out. The ego flares up. Shame enters. Anger follows. The emotional urge says, withdraw. Get defensive. Shut down. Prove they're wrong. Check out for the rest of the day. That is the impulse. Now ask the better question. What does the situation require? It requires composure. It requires listening. It requires correction. It requires returning to work with more clarity, not less. That is what maturity looks like. Not feeling nothing. Doing the right thing while feeling plenty. That matters. Because a lot of people think mature people are calm because life hits them less. No. Mature people are calm because they have trained themselves to act correctly even when life hits hard. They do not need perfect emotions to produce useful behavior. That's the key. Now look at promises. This one exposes almost everybody. You said you would wake up early. You said you would train. You said you would finish the project. You said you would have the conversation. You said you would stop running every time things got hard. Then the day comes, and motivation is gone. Now what? The emotional urge says, not today. I'm tired. I'm not in the right headspace. I'll do it when I feel more ready. That sounds harmless. It is not harmless. It is identity training. Every time you break a promise because your mood changed, you teach yourself that your word is conditional. You teach your nervous system that discomfort cancels commitment. You teach yourself that intention matters more than follow-through. It does not. Your next action is your real mindset. Say that again. Your next action is your real mindset. Not your podcast playlist. Not your journal entry. Not your self-awareness. Your next action. If your action says retreat, your mindset is retreat. If your action says delay, your mindset is delay. If your action says continue, your mindset is becoming discipline. Do what is required, not what is rewarded emotionally. Then the hard conversation. This is where emotional urgency loves to wear a costume. People say they are just being honest, but really they are being impulsive. They want to dump the feeling fast. They want immediate release. They want the other person to feel the heat they are feeling. That is not courageous communication. That is unfiltered pressure. The emotional urge says, say it now. Say it sharp. Say all of it. Make sure they feel it. But what does the situation require? It requires clarity. It requires timing. It requires restraint. It requires saying the truth without theatrics. That is grown behavior. That is disciplined behavior. And notice the pattern in all of this. The first impulse is rarely the strongest move. It is just the fastest. It is the body trying to get relief. But relief is not always the same as resolution. You have a choice. Replace the impulse. That is the work in this chapter. Replace the impulse. When the spiral says hide, you clarify. When it says lash out, you pause. When it says quit, you continue. When it says perform, you steady yourself. When it says defend your ego, you return to the task. When it says not now, you move anyway. Replace the impulse. That's the key. This is not theory. This is a behavioral system. You need replacements ready before the moment comes. Not vague hopes. Replacements. If criticism makes you withdraw, your replacement is to ask one clarifying question and take one corrective action. If discomfort makes you avoid, your replacement is to stay in the room 5 minutes longer than your emotion wants. If anger makes you send the text, your replacement is to draft it, save it, and return later. If shame makes you disappear, your replacement is to respond simply, own the mistake, and remain present. If low motivation makes you quit, your replacement is to reduce the task and still do something. That is how discipline is built. Not by waiting to feel stronger. By acting stronger before the feeling arrives. Move with purpose. Say it again. Move with purpose. Purpose means your action is chosen, not leaked. Purpose means the moment does not get to decide for you. Purpose means you already know the standard before the discomfort tries to negotiate it downward. That is self-respect. That is how reliable people are made. Reliable people are not blessed with easier emotions. They simply stopped allowing emotion to rewrite the plan every hour. And that is what many listeners need to hear. You do not need to become less emotional to become more effective. You need to become less obedient to emotion. That's the key. Mature people are not those who feel less. They are those who can act correctly while feeling more. They can be disappointed and still show up. They can be embarrassed and still speak clearly. They can be frustrated and still keep their word. They can be angry and still choose timing. They can be tired and still do what matters. They can be afraid and still move. That is what adulthood looks like when it is trained instead of merely discussed. So here is the practical framework. First, stop asking, "How do I feel?" before every important action. Ask, "What is required?" Feelings can be acknowledged. They cannot be allowed to vote on every decision. Second, define your common impulses. What do you do when pressure rises? Hide. Explain. Delay. Overtalk. Quit. Defend. Once you know your default pattern, you can interrupt it. Third, choose a replacement behavior in advance. One replacement per pattern. Simple. Concrete. Repeatable. Fourth, reduce drama and increase motion. Do not make the required action bigger than it is. Make the call. Send the simple message. Reopen the laptop. Finish the set. Return to the room. Start again. Fifth, reward follow-through, not emotional comfort. At the end of the day, ask, "Did I do what was required?" Not, "Did I feel good?" Not, "Was I inspired?" Not, "Was it easy?" Did I do what was required? That is the scoreboard. It's not about intensity, it's about consistency. That's the key. And understand this clearly. Deliberate action is how you reclaim authority from the spiral. The spiral wants reaction. Discipline wants decision. The spiral wants urgency. Discipline wants alignment. The spiral wants relief now. Discipline wants results later. Your life will be shaped by which voice you reward. You have a choice. And it shows up all day long. In the morning when you do not want to get up. In the meeting after criticism. In the silence before the hard conversation. In the lonely hour when no one is watching. In the ordinary moment when discomfort whispers, escape. Those moments are not interruptions to your growth. They are your growth. Replace the impulse. Move with purpose. Do what is required, not what is rewarded emotionally. Your next action is your real mindset. Remember that. Because this book is about ending the spiral, not admiring it. Ending it means becoming a person whose behavior no longer kneels to every emotional wave. It means acting from standards, not surges. It means becoming harder to derail because your actions are chosen before the mood arrives. You are learning to act with discipline under pressure. Good. But there is still another trap waiting for you. The belief that the world should organize itself around your internal state. That belief keeps people emotionally dependent and permanently unstable. Chapter 8. Stop needing the world to match your mood. One of the clearest signs of emotional immaturity is this. You expect the world to adjust itself to your internal state. You feel unstable, so you want people to reassure you. You feel insecure, so you want instant replies. You feel irritated, so you want everyone to soften their tone. You feel overwhelmed, so you want the room to reorganize around your tension. That is not sensitivity. That is entitlement. That's the key. And if you do not confront this, you will stay trapped in a very expensive pattern. You will spend your life trying to regulate yourself by controlling other people. You will keep demanding that the outside world become smoother, softer, faster, and more comforting so you do not have to build inner steadiness. But adulthood does not work that way. Adulthood begins when you stop making everyone else responsible for your internal weather. Say it again. Adulthood begins when you stop making everyone else responsible for your internal weather. Your mood is yours to manage. That is the standard. Your mood is yours to manage. This chapter matters because many emotional spirals are not just reactions to pain. They are attempts to regain power. Not through discipline. Through pressure. Through control. Through emotional force. That is what a lot of people do when they do not know how to regulate themselves. They try to regulate the room instead. They make other people walk carefully. They demand certain tones. They require constant reassurance. They turn their discomfort into everyone else's assignment. And then they call it love. They call it communication. They call it being understood. No. A lot of the time, it is simply dependency with emotional language on top of it. You have a choice. You can build self-control. Or you can keep trying to manage your emotions by managing everybody around you. Only one of those makes you stronger. It's not about comfort, it's about responsibility. That's the key. Take the person who expects instant replies. A message is sent. 10 minutes pass. Then 20. Then an hour. And suddenly the mind is spinning. Why haven't they responded? Did I say something wrong? Are they upset? Are they pulling away? Then the behavior begins. Another text. A passive-aggressive comment. A cold attitude later on. Emotional pressure starts entering the interaction because silence was interpreted as a threat. What is really happening there? Insecurity is asking another person to regulate it. Instead of saying, "I feel activated and I need to manage my own state," the person silently demands, "You must reply fast enough to keep me emotionally stable." That is not connection. That is outsourcing. Stop outsourcing your stability. Say it again. Stop outsourcing your stability. That's the key. Now look at tone. Some people are not asking for respect. They are asking for perfect emotional cushioning at all times. If someone is direct, they call it harsh. If someone is distracted, they call it cold. If someone is brief, they call it hostile. They need constant softness because they have not built the capacity to stay steady in the presence of anything less than ideal. That is a problem, because real life is full of imperfect delivery. People are tired, busy, focused, blunt, human. And if your emotional stability depends on everyone else speaking exactly the way your nervous system prefers, then your life will be full of unnecessary pain. Your mood is yours to manage, not theirs. This does not mean other people get a free pass to be cruel. It means you stop acting like every imperfect tone is a personal emergency. It means you stop confusing your internal activation with another person's moral failure. Self-control is self-respect. That's the key. Then there is the most manipulative form of this pattern, emotional volatility as a tool of control. This one is ugly, but common. Some people learn that if they get upset enough, the room changes. Voices soften. Plans shift. Attention turns toward them. Accountability disappears. Other people start walking carefully, trying not to trigger another reaction. So volatility becomes power. Not conscious power, always, but functional power. The outburst gets results. The tears redirect the conversation. The shutdown punishes people. The emotional storm becomes a way of controlling the environment without ever saying, clearly and maturely, what is needed. That is weakness pretending to be force. And it destroys trust. Because nobody feels safe around a person whose feelings keep becoming weapons. The listener needs to hear this clearly. If your instability changes the room more than your character does, you are not leading. You are pressuring. And pressure is not power. That's the key. A lot of spirals are really attempts to escape helplessness. The person feels uncertain, exposed, ignored, or small. Instead of calming themselves, they push outward. They demand reassurance. They create guilt. They make the other person responsible for restoring balance. Why? Because self-regulation is harder than emotional pressure. That is the truth. It is easier to make your pain loud than to make yourself steady. It is easier to demand comfort than to build capacity. It is easier to say, "Why didn't you make me feel secure?" than to ask, "Why is my stability so dependent on external behavior?" You have a choice. You can keep reaching outward every time your state collapses. Or you can start building a center that does not need instant rescue. It's not about neediness, it's about discipline. That's the key. Now let's make this practical. First, stop treating your emotional activation as someone else's immediate duty. If you feel triggered, unsettled, insecure, or irritated, your first task is not to manage them. Your first task is to manage you. Pause. Breathe. Name what is happening. Delay the reaction. Return to facts. Do not rush to make another person fix what you have not even tried to hold. Your mood is yours to manage. Second, separate preference from entitlement. You may prefer quick replies. You may prefer warmth. You may prefer reassurance. Fine. Preferences are human. Entitlement is when you start believing those preferences must be met for you to remain stable. That is where the problem begins. That is where your peace becomes fragile because it now depends on conditions you do not control. And fragile peace is not peace. That's the key. Third, learn to sit in unanswered space without creating a crisis. This is a massive discipline in modern life. A delayed reply, a neutral look, a brief message, a quiet room, a change of tone. Can you let ambiguity exist without rushing to fill it with fear and demand? Can you hold uncertainty without making it somebody else's emergency? That is maturity. That is strength. Fourth, ask directly instead of pressuring emotionally. If you need clarity, ask for clarity. If you need a conversation, request a conversation. If you need a boundary, state a boundary. Do not use sulking, withdrawal, sharp tone, passive aggression, or emotional flooding as substitutes for adult communication. Say the thing cleanly. You don't need their permission to communicate with maturity. You do not need volatility to have a voice. Fifth, stop expecting the world to soothe every version of you. This may be the hardest truth in the chapter. The world is not your emotional support system. Say it again. The world is not your emotional support system. Your partner is not responsible for regulating every insecurity you refuse to examine. Your friends are not responsible for absorbing every unprocessed feeling you refuse to hold. Your co-workers are not responsible for constantly cushioning your reactions. Other people can support you, love you, help you, but support is not ownership. Care is not regulation. Connection is not emotional babysitting. Self-control is self-respect. And self-respect means you stop handing your emotional center to whoever happens to be near you. Stop outsourcing your stability. That phrase matters because outsourced stability never lasts. Even if people reassure you, it fades. Even if they soften their tone, another trigger comes. Even if they reply instantly today, tomorrow they may be busy. So if your peace depends on perfect behavior from imperfect people, you will stay unstable forever. That is why the answer is internal. Not isolation. Not pride. Not pretending you need nobody. Internal responsibility. Real responsibility. The kind that says, my state is my work. That's the key. This chapter is not teaching coldness. It is teaching ownership. You can still ask for support. You can still express needs. You can still want kindness. But you stop demanding that other people carry the burden of emotional stability you have never trained in yourself. That changes everything. It makes your relationships cleaner, your communication clearer, your reactions quieter, your confidence deeper. Because now you are not waiting for the world to line up perfectly so you can feel okay. You are becoming the kind of person who can remain grounded even when the world is ordinary, imperfect, delayed, distracted, or sharp. That is power. That is adulthood. That is freedom. Your mood is yours to manage. Self-control is self-respect. Stop outsourcing your stability. The world is not your emotional support system. Remember those lines. Live those lines. Because the emotional spiral gets weaker the moment you stop using other people as a regulation strategy. The spiral wants rescue. Discipline wants responsibility. The spiral wants the room to bend. Discipline teaches you to stand. You have a choice. Stand. Own your state. Carry yourself well. That is how you reclaim control. You stopped making the world responsible for your mood. Good. But discipline is not proven by never slipping. It is proven by how fast you return when you do. Now it is time to learn the recovery skill that changes everything. Chapter 9. Train the discipline of returning fast. A lot of people think emotional strength means never getting shaken, never getting angry, never getting hurt, never getting embarrassed, never getting thrown off. That is fantasy. That is not strength. That is image management. Real emotional strength is not never getting triggered. Real emotional strength is noticing it faster, owning it faster, correcting it faster, and returning to center before the damage spreads. That's the key. Your power is in how fast you return. Say it again. Your power is in how fast you return. This chapter matters because perfectionism keeps people weak. Perfectionism tells you that one bad moment means failure. One emotional slip means you are back at the beginning. One hard morning means the whole day is lost. One mistake means your identity is exposed. One argument means the relationship is broken. No, that is not wisdom. That is drama wearing the mask of high standards. You have a choice. You can worship perfection and stay fragile. Or you can train recovery and become strong. Only one of those works in real life. It's not about perfection, it's about recovery. That's the key. The strongest people are not the ones who never wobble. They are the ones who wobble and recover. Fast. clean, without ceremony, without turning one hard moment into a personal mythology. That is resilience. And resilience is measured in recovery, not image. Say that again. Resilience is measured in recovery, not image. Look at the bad morning. You wake up late. You miss a routine. You spill something. You get a frustrating message. Your mind feels off. Most people make the same mistake here. They do not just have a bad morning. They narrate a bad day into existence. Today is ruined. I'm already behind. Nothing is going right. Then the morning infects the afternoon. The afternoon infects the evening. And by night, they are exhausted from a story that started before breakfast. Why? Because they did not return. They drifted. They surrendered the whole day to the first emotional hit. But disciplined people do something different. They reset fast. That's the key. A bad morning does not become a bad week unless you keep feeding it. One off moment does not deserve 12 more hours of obedience. You stop. You breathe. You tell the truth. The morning started badly. That is all. Then you continue. That is maturity. Not dramatic recovery. Fast recovery. Now take the mistake. You mess something up. You forget something important. You say the wrong thing. You fail publicly. You make a poor decision. Now the emotional temptation is huge. Shame says, collapse. Pride says, defend. Fear says, hide. Ego says, make excuses. That is the moment. And that moment determines everything. Because one mistake does not destroy people. Their response to one mistake destroys them. The person with no recovery skill turns a mistake into self-destruction. They spiral. They disappear. They make speeches about being a failure. They become harder to trust because they are more committed to performing collapse than correcting reality. But the disciplined person returns fast. They stop. They breathe. They tell the truth. I made a mistake. No extra theater. No self-hatred masquerading as accountability. No emotional fireworks. Just truth. Then correction. Then motion. Then continuation. Do not build a home in a bad moment. Say it again. Do not build a home in a bad moment. That is what many people do. They move in emotionally. They decorate the place. They invite every old insecurity to live there with them. One mistake becomes proof of everything they have feared about themselves. One failure becomes an address. No. A bad moment is a location, not an identity. Visit it. Learn from it. Leave it. That's the key. Now look at conflict. An argument begins. Somebody says something sharp. You feel misunderstood, hurt, angry, defensive. Maybe you say something you should not have said. Maybe they do too. In that moment, people often choose escalation because escalation feels powerful. They raise the volume, sharpen the tone, dig up old evidence, expand the issue. Now one disagreement becomes emotional warfare. Why? Because nobody returned. Nobody reset. Nobody decided that the relationship mattered more than the rush of being right. This is where emotional adults separate themselves from emotional children. Emotional children need the moment to prove something. Emotional adults need the moment to stop bleeding. That is strength. Returning fast in conflict looks like this: I'm getting reactive. That came out wrong. Let me slow down. That is not what I want this conversation to become. Let's return to the actual issue. That is not weakness. That is command. You don't need their permission to return to self-control. You do not need their permission to lower your voice. You do not need their permission to stop the spiral before it becomes destruction. That's the key. Now let's get practical, because recovery is a skill, and skills need structure. Here is the return protocol. Stop. Breathe. Tell the truth. Correct the action. Continue the mission. Simple. Powerful. Repeatable. Start with stop. When you notice the spiral, stop feeding it. Stop the extra sentence. Stop the dramatic conclusion. Stop the impulsive text. Stop the internal speech that is turning one moment into a catastrophe. Stop does not mean freeze forever. It means stop the spread. Then breathe. Not because breathing is magic, but because speed is the enemy of return. Your body needs a signal that the emergency is not absolute. Slow the breath. Loosen the jaw. Drop the shoulders. Reset the physical state enough to access a better response. Then tell the truth. Not the dramatic truth. The actual truth. This upset me. I made a mistake. I'm getting carried away. This is a setback, not a collapse. That conversation went badly, but it does not need to own the whole day. Truth shortens recovery time because truth removes exaggeration. Facts, not performance. That's the key. Then correct the action. If you snapped, apologize. If you avoided, respond. If you made an error, fix it. If you drifted, restart. If you wasted an hour spiraling, reclaim the next hour. Correction matters because insight without behavior is just emotional entertainment. Saying, "I know I need to do better," means nothing if no action changes afterward. Your next action is your real reset. Then continue the mission. This is where many people fail. They stop, breathe, admit, maybe even apologize. But then they keep staring at the emotional wreckage. They sit in it, analyze it, revisit it, refeel it. They never fully return. No. Continue. Go back to work. Finish the task. Re-enter the day. Resume the conversation properly. Pick the standard back up and keep moving. Return to the standard. Say it again. Return to the standard. The standard is not your mood. The standard is not your last mistake. The standard is the person you are training yourself to be. Steady, honest, correctable, reliable, focused. When you return to the standard quickly, you weaken the spiral. When you delay the return, you strengthen it. Your power is in how fast you return. That is the law. And this applies everywhere. Missed the workout? Reset fast. Train tomorrow. Or train later today. Ate badly? Reset fast. Next meal. Lost your temper? Reset fast. Tell the truth. Repair the damage. Fell into overthinking? Reset fast. Stand up. Move. Re-engage. Wasted the morning? Reset fast. Win the afternoon. Do not make a second mistake to justify the first one. That is what weak people do. They miss one step, then abandon the whole staircase. They lose one round, then surrender the whole fight. They let one crack become collapse. You have a choice. You can extend the damage, or you can end it early. That's the key. And understand something important. Fast return is not denial. It is not pretending nothing happened. It is not emotional repression. It is respect for time. Respect for mission. Respect for the fact that your life cannot afford to keep paying interest on moments that should have ended sooner. Self-destruction is often just delayed recovery. Think about that. How many people ruin weeks they could have saved in 1 hour? How many people lose relationships they could have repaired in one sentence? How many people destroy momentum they could have protected with one reset? Too many. Because they do not know how to return. Now you do. Reset fast. Do not build a home in a bad moment. Return to the standard. Your power is in how fast you return. Remember those lines. Use them immediately. Because this whole book is not about becoming untouchable. It is about becoming recoverable. Life will still hit you. Emotions will still rise. Mistakes will still happen. But they will stop owning you for longer than they deserve. That is freedom. That is resilience. That is real discipline. You have learned how to return. Good. Now it is time to become the kind of person who is so grounded, so steady, and so disciplined that emotion no longer gets to rule the structure of your life. Chapter 10. Become too grounded to be ruled by emotion. This is the end goal. Not numbness. Not coldness. Not pretending you do not care. Not becoming distant, robotic, or hollow. The goal is grounded power. The kind of power that still feels deeply, but does not fall apart every time life applies pressure. The kind of power that does not break formation because of a mood. The kind of power that does not need drama to feel alive. That is the target. Strong is steady. Say it again. Strong is steady. That's the key. A lot of people confuse emotional intensity with strength. They think the loudest person is the strongest person. They think the person with the biggest reaction must care the most. They think passion is proven by volatility. They think power is proven by force. No. That is weakness in motion. Real strength is harder to see at first because it is quieter. It does not need to announce itself. It does not need to flood the room. It does not need to perform pain, outrage, or urgency just to feel significant. It stays in control. That is why strong is steady. The disciplined person still feels anger, still feels grief, still feels disappointment, still feels fear, still feels pressure. But they do not become a different person every time those feelings arrive. They do not abandon their values for a surge. They do not throw away their structure because a moment got heavy. They hold formation. That is grounded power. You have a choice. You can keep living as a person who is ruled by internal weather. Or you can become the kind of person whose standard remains intact when the weather changes. Only one of those creates a life you can trust. It's not about emotion, it's about command. That's the key. Look at the reactive life. It is expensive. It burns energy everywhere. One comment ruins the day. One delay creates insecurity. One mistake becomes self-attack. One hard week becomes a crisis of identity. That person is always recovering from themselves. Always explaining, apologizing, restarting, recalibrating, trying to patch the holes caused by yesterday's reaction. They are busy, but not effective. Exhausted, but not accomplished. Full of feeling, but low on results. Why? Because drama consumes energy that should have gone into building. The reactive person lives in emotional debt. Every outburst costs focus. Every spiral costs time. Every overreaction costs trust. Every mood-led decision costs momentum. And the bill keeps coming. Now look at the grounded life. Same world. Same pressure. Same uncertainty. Same disrespect sometimes. Same setbacks. Same difficult conversations. Same disappointments. But different response. This person keeps showing up. Keeps adjusting. Keeps training. Keeps working. Keeps building. Keeps moving without needing emotional perfection first. They are not unfeeling. They are economical. That matters. Because consistent victories come from emotional economy, not emotional intensity. Say it again. Consistent victories come from emotional economy, not emotional intensity. That's the key. Emotional economy means you stop wasting energy on things that do not deserve full access to your system. You stop spending an entire day on a 10-minute trigger. You stop turning inconvenience into identity. You stop paying with your peace for every imperfect tone, delayed response, awkward moment, or temporary setback. You become more selective, more measured, more clean. That is what grounded people do. They conserve energy for what matters. They do not leak it into chaos. And that is why they win quietly. This is important. Quiet winning is still winning. In fact, it is usually the most sustainable kind. The grounded person does not need the emotional high of constant reaction because they are getting something better. Forward movement, real progress, stable relationships, a trustworthy mind, a reliable presence, a life that is no longer being rerouted by moods every few hours. That is power. Steadiness is power. Say it again. Steadiness is power. A lot of people will never understand this because they are addicted to emotional theatrics. They think calm means weak. They think restraint means passive. They think if you are not reacting loudly, you must not care. Let them think that. You do not need their permission to stay grounded. You do not need their permission to move with control. You do not need their permission to stop performing your feelings like proof of your depth. You are not here to impress unstable people with how intensely you can react. You are here to build a life. That's the key. And life is built by the person who can keep going, not the person who can keep flaring. The grounded person is dangerous to chaos because chaos cannot easily recruit them. They are difficult to bait, difficult to rush, difficult to throw off course. Not because they are detached from life, but because they have trained themselves not to surrender the steering wheel every time emotion enters the vehicle. Calm is a weapon. Say it again. Calm is a weapon. It is a weapon because it protects clarity. It is a weapon because it protects timing. It is a weapon because it protects judgment. It is a weapon because while everyone else is reacting, the calm person is seeing. And the person who sees clearly usually wins. The strongest person in the room is the one who stays in control. That is one of the great truths of adult life. Not the loudest person. Not the angriest person. Not the most offended person. Not the person with the fastest comeback. The one who stays in control. Because control preserves options. Control preserves dignity. Control preserves strategy. Control preserves momentum. That is real strength. Now here is the final shift this chapter has to make. Identity is not something you declare. It is something you earn. That's the key. A lot of people want to feel disciplined before they act disciplined. They want to feel grounded before they make grounded choices. They want confidence before action, stability before restraint, calm before standards. That is backwards. You become disciplined by acting disciplined repeatedly under stress. You become grounded by choosing grounded behavior while pressure is present. You become steady by returning to steady actions again and again until they become familiar. Identity is built through repetition. What you repeat, you become. So if you want to become the kind of person who is too grounded to be ruled by emotion, you do not wait for a magical day when you finally feel unshakable. You start now. In traffic. In conflict. In disappointment. In boredom. In delay. In embarrassment. In ordinary life. That is where identity is forged. Not in slogans. In moments. You have a choice. And the choice is usually small. Do I react, or do I regulate? Do I dramatize, or do I stay with facts? Do I chase relief, or do I protect the mission? Do I let this mood run the hour, or do I return to the standard? Those choices look small. They are not small. They are identity votes. Every one of them. It's not about personality, it's about repetition. That's the key. So what does grounded living actually look like from here? It looks like fewer speeches and more correction. It looks like fewer emotional emergencies and more clean decisions. It looks like less explaining and more doing. It looks like more sleep, more walking, more restraint, more clarity, more directness, more recovery, more consistency. It looks like a person whose inner life is no longer a daily hostage situation. It looks like self-respect. And make no mistake, that kind of life feels different. Lighter, cleaner, more powerful. Not because life became easy. Because you stopped making it harder with reaction, exaggeration, and emotional leakage. You stopped helping chaos do its job. That is growth. That is maturity. That is discipline. Strong is steady. Calm is a weapon. Steadiness is power. The strongest person in the room is the one who stays in control. Remember those lines. Live those lines. Because this entire audiobook has been building toward this final point. The emotional spiral loses its grip the moment you stop feeding it with identity, obedience, performance, urgency, and external dependence. It loses power when you become a person with standards stronger than their surges. That is what you are building now. A quieter strength. A more dangerous clarity. A discipline that does not beg emotion for permission before it acts. You have a choice. Choose steadiness. Choose the standard. Choose the long game over the emotional hit. Choose to become too grounded to be ruled by temporary feeling. That is how real discipline is built. That is how real peace is protected. That is how real power is earned. You have walked through the whole pattern. You have learned to separate identity from reaction, feeling from obedience, urgency from action, and pressure from collapse. Now there is only one thing left to do. Close the book with a final challenge that turns these lessons into a standard the listener must live. Now you know the truth. The emotional spiral was never a small problem. It was the leak draining your focus, your discipline, your relationships, your confidence, and your future. Every time you obeyed the impulse, you trained weakness. Every time you let emotion take the wheel, you moved farther from the life you say you want. But now the pattern has a name, the cycle has been exposed, and the work is clear. Feel without obeying. Pause without collapsing. Think without dramatizing. Act without waiting for the perfect mood. Return fast. Return strong. Return to the standard again and again until control becomes your nature. This is your challenge. For the next 7 days, do not let one emotional wave make one decision for you. Notice it. Name it. Refuse it. Then do what is required. That is how discipline begins. That is how power returns. That is how your life changes.